What's up, Disney dudes and dudettes? In this video, we'll be talking about 32 fun facts you didn't know about Haunted Mansion coming up.
I'm gonna do what I do, put it all together, ain't nothing better, I'm gonna do.
From its eerie exterior to its spooky interior, the Haunted Mansion has been delighting and frightening guests since it first opened in Disneyland in 1969. And over the years, this classic attraction has become a beloved staple in all of the Disney parks all around the world. So whether you're a die-hard Haunted Mansion fan or just looking to learn more about this attraction, I've got 32 fun facts that are sure to surprise and delight you. From its hidden details to surprising inspirations, we'll explore everything that makes the Haunted Mansion so unique and memorable. So sit back, relax, and get ready to take a spooky journey through the history and secrets of the Haunted Mansion. So without further ado, let's get into it. Believe it or not, the Haunted Mansion actually started out as a very different kind of attraction. Originally, the idea was for it to be a simple walkthrough experience. Guests would be led through the doors and into several different rooms where illusions caused by ghosts would play out. It was a simple yet effective idea, but there was one big problem. It would require a lot of time. You see, the Imagineers had some really impressive concepts and methods for their illusions, but they all took time to reset and perfect, and when you're dealing with a high-volume attraction like the Haunted Mansion, time is of the essence, so the Imagineers had to go back to the drawing board and come up with a new plan. Did you know that the original concept for the Haunted Mansion included live character actors as guides and ghosts? Your guide would be dressed as a butler and would lead guests through the halls of the manor and at times trigger illusions or effects. Some actors would even portray ghosts or suits of armor to jump out and scare the guests. It definitely would have added an extra layer of spookiness to the attraction, however, there were a couple of problems with this idea. For one thing, it didn't exactly fit Walt's idea of a family-friendly atmosphere. He wanted the Haunted Mansion to be spooky yet fun, but not be too scary for younger guests. Additionally, there was some concern over actor safety that needed to be considered. So as with the walkthrough concept, the idea of live character actors was ultimately scrapped. But this actually worked out in their favor. The Imagineers didn't let that stop them from creating an unforgettable experience. From the ghostly portraits to the singing busts, they found plenty of ways to bring the Haunted Mansion to life without relying on live actors. Did you know that when the idea of having a guide was still on the table, the studio considered enlisting the voice of Peter Lorre? He was a well-known actor at the time, and his distinctive voice would have made a unique and spooky element to the attraction. Initially, the plan was for Lorre to provide a simple guide narration, but soon the Imagineers began envisioning him as a full-fledged character, specifically that of the Lonesome Ghost. Inspired by the Mickey Mouse short of the same name, the Lonesome Ghost was a ghost of the Haunted Mansion with an affection for humans and would also play practical pranks on them as well. And with Peter Lorre's voice and talent, he would have made it a memorable addition to the attraction. Unfortunately, the idea of the Lonesome Ghost never came to pass, but it did lead to the inspiration for Paul Frees' Ghost Host, who guides guests through the Haunted Mansion to this day. Did you know that Haunted Mansion was going to feature a character that was going to tie into Pirates of the Caribbean? As many of you know, both of these iconic attractions are located in Disneyland Park, and they share a few common threads. One of the most interesting connections is the infamous pirate Jean Lafitte, I'm hoping I'm saying that right, who appears in both attractions in different forms, with Lafitte's Landing being a location in the original Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and the ghost of Lafitte supposedly appearing in the Haunted Mansion. It's easy to see the connection. Over the years, there have been many ideas for how to tie these two attractions together, and in terms of backstory and imagery. From ideas such as Lafitte himself being the mansion's resident pirate to a treasure hidden beneath the manor. The Imagineers tossed around many exciting concepts. While most of these ideas never came to fruition, they remain as Easter eggs and nods to fans who know their Disney lore. And speaking of pirates, another early concept was called the Tale of Captain Gore. Now, if you've been on the Haunted Mansion recently, you may be scratching your head and wondering, who the heck is Captain Gore? That's because he was originally part of a scarier version of the attraction that never made it to the final cut. Thank goodness. In this version, Captain Gore was the mansion's sea captain ghost and a murderous pirate antagonist. Creepy! The storyline involved a gruesome murder plot and several morbid scenes that were deemed too intense for the park's family-friendly image. So as with many of the Haunted Mansion's early concepts, it was scrapped, thankfully. But there happens to be a comic book version of the Haunted Mansion that definitely revolves around Captain Gore. And while we may never get to experience his full story in the attraction itself, it's fascinating to think of what could have been. Another unused concept for the Haunted Mansion, one that was a little more family-friendly than a murderous pirate captain, but still had a bit of edge. This concept involved the Blood family and a hazardous wedding party that quite literally brought the house down. In this storyline, guests would have entered the manor as attendees at a ghost bride's wedding reception. Ooh, sounds creepy. This would have been an enormous wedding ceremony before the roof caved in and recreated their demise. While the idea was ultimately scrapped, it's been fascinating to think of what could have been. The Haunted Mansion has always been a favorite for its spooky yet fun atmosphere, and this concept definitely had that in spades. And while it may have been a bit too intense for some guests, parts of it can be seen reused in Disneyland Paris's Phantom Manor. Another version of the haunting wedding theme would have featured famous horror monsters as the guest of honor at the after party. Yep, we're talking Dracula, Frankenstein, and even Phantom of the Opera. Now that's just creepy. There was even concept art that showed these characters mingling with the happy haunts, making for a seriously spooky celebration. But there was one problem, and that was the licensing. Getting the rights to use all of these famous figures would have been a nightmare for Disney, literally. So the company made the smart decision to create its own characters and stick with them, and we have to say we think that worked out pretty well. Another version of the Haunted Mansion would have been called the Museum of the Weird. Designed by Imagineer Raleigh Crump, the Museum of the Weird was meant to be a collection of oddities on display as an exit attraction to the manor. Walt Disney himself was a fan of the idea, but unfortunately it never came to fruition. However, pieces of the museum can still be found scattered throughout the ride. One of the most famous Museum of the Weird artifacts is the face chair. It's just another example of the kind of oddities that would have been on display in the Museum of the Weird. And we can only imagine the other creepy curiosities that Raleigh Crump had in mind. Another early concept that never quite made it off the ground was a water ride version of the mansion. Imagineer and Disney legend Claude Coates briefly developed a plan for a version of the ride that would have guests floating through the ruins of an old plantation house partially submerged in a Louisiana bayou. We can only imagine how spooky this would have been, gliding through the murky waters, seeing ghosts pop out here and there. Unfortunately, the water ride version of the Haunted Mansion never came to be, but we can still appreciate the creativity and innovation that went into the concept. Another fun fact about the Haunted Mansion is that there are exactly 999 happy haunts. From the moment you step into the compressed carriages and start your journey through the mansion, you're surrounded by ghosts, literally everywhere. Some of these actually have specific names, like for instance the Hatbox Ghost or the Hitchhiking Ghosts. But the most impressive display, and the most memorable of course, has got to be the ballroom scene. Literally, it's incredible to think how they pulled that off. While the true storyline of the ride may be up for debate, there are a few ideas that give us a pretty good idea of what's going on. One crazy theory is that the ride actually puts passengers in the middle of the action. As you journey through the mansion, you'll notice that you actually didn't see any ghosts. You just hear and see very spooky things. Until you meet Madame Leota, then that's when things start to get interesting. And then all of a sudden, you start to see ghosts pop out everywhere, specifically the ballroom scene. So it's kind of interesting to think that all of a sudden, you're starting to see ghosts. But here's where things get really creepy and take a turn for the worst. As you make your way up to the attic, you encounter the ghost bride, Constance, dressed in her wedding dress, and she's definitely not happy to see you. You know, I've heard that she's quite rough around the edges. You get it? Da-dum, boom. Okay, that was terrible. You'll notice that after you meet her, you start to go backwards and specifically downwards. This is because Constance actually pushes the guests out the window, specifically the attic window, because if you look at it very closely, you'll notice that the attic window is broken, supposedly when you fell out. The fall literally kills the guests, making you the 1,000 ghosts in the Haunted Mansion. When I heard this, I was like, what? No, that's just crazy. But if you think about it, it actually makes sense and it's downright creepy. One thing you may not know about the classic attraction is that the small carriages that take you through the mansion are actually called doom buggies. It's a fitting name for these eerie little vehicles, but not one that is commonly known or referenced. However, if you listen closely to the track playing throughout the ride, you can hear the narrator mention the doom buggies by name. And if you're paying attention, you can even spot the name on one of the tombstones just outside the queue. Did you know that Tony the Tiger makes an appearance on the Haunted Mansion? While the famous animated character Tony the Tiger may not make a direct appearance, the man behind the voice says, "They're great." Oh, that was actually pretty good. Thurl Ravenscroft, the voice of Tony the Tiger, is actually one of the 5 grim-grinning ghost busts that sings in the quintet during the ride. His deep bass voice is easily recognizable in the ensemble, and it's just one of the many reasons that makes the Haunted Mansion so fascinating. But his talent doesn't end there. He's actually the one that sings, "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch." Man, that was a good one. And is sometimes mistaken for Walt Disney on the ride. It just goes to show you how much creativity and talent went into the making of this attraction. Did you know that the Haunted Mansion ride goes by different names in different parts around the world? In Disneyland Paris, it's called Phantom Manor, and it has a unique storyline that differs from the original Haunted Mansion. The Phantom Manor follows the tale of a family of Western settlers who became wealthy during the gold rush, only to face a series of mysteries and tragic events. Not to mention, the narrator for the Phantom Manor has to be none other than Vincent Price. Meanwhile, over in Hong Kong Disneyland, the Haunted Mansion takes on a whole new persona that is called Mystic Manor. This version of the ride features a magical music box that brings inanimate objects to life and takes visitors on a whimsical journey through a grand estate filled with enchanted artifacts. Did you know that the character in the Haunted Mansion, Madame Leota, was actually based off of 2 Disney legends? Leota Toombs was an Imagineer who played a vital role in the creation of the Haunted Mansion. Raleigh Crump and Yale Gracie, 2 of the masterminds behind the ride, asked Leota to record her face as a test for the projection effect they were working on. Originally, they had planned to use the face of actress Eleanor Audley, who voiced none other than Maleficent and Lady Tremaine, and she would go on to be the voice of Madame Leota. But something very interesting happened. When the Imagineers saw Leota's version, they were blown away. Her hauntingly beautiful face was just perfect for the role of Madame Leota. And so, that's how the name Madame Leota came to be. So if you think about it, we have Leota Toombs to thank. Also, when you exit the ride, you'll notice that there's a miniature ghost hostess that's saying, "Hurry back, hurry back." This is actually the voice and the face of Leota Toombs herself. This was actually so dear to her daughter, Kim Irvine, that she too became a Disney Imagineer. Funny enough, during the season when the Haunted Mansion undergoes a major refurbishment in the style of Nightmare Before Christmas, Leota Toombs' daughter, Kim Irvine, actually takes her place as Madame Leota. Not to mention her daughter as well works for Disney. So talk about 3 generations of Disney history. One of the most legendary Disney voice actors of all time is Paul Frees. Now, you might not recognize his name, but I guarantee you've heard his voice in some of your favorite Disney attractions. Not only did Paul Frees provide the voice for some of our favorite characters like Professor Von Drake, but he also gave us the spine-tingling narration of the ghost host in the Haunted Mansion. His hauntingly dramatic and impeccable timing set the tone for one of the most beloved attractions in Disney parks. But wait, there's more. Paul Frees also lent his vocal talents to many of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride characters, including the original infamous Auctioneer. His deep and brooding voice definitely set the tone for Pirates of the Caribbean. So next time you're on Haunted Mansion, think of Paul Frees, the voice behind the many Disney attractions. And speaking of the Haunted Mansion narrator, did you know at one time it was actually going to be a raven instead of the ghost host? The Imagineers strongly considered having a raven guide guests through the eerie halls of the mansion. This concept, it was very similar to Tiki Room. This would actually be an audio animatronic raven that they could have used. But they decided instead to go with the ghost host, which in my opinion is actually better. If you look closely though, you'll notice that the raven is in the main segments of the attraction. It's a subtle nod to the original idea and adds a layer of intrigue and mystery to the ride. Not to mention his creepy red eyes are really creepy. Seriously, oof. Did you know that the Disneyland version of the Haunted Mansion was largely inspired by a real-life house in Baltimore, Maryland? The house that inspired the attraction was the Shipley Leckdecker house, which was featured in the book Decorative Art of Victoria's Era. This house definitely had a major influence on the design of the Haunted Mansion. The original design of the mansion consisted of a rundown, boarded-up haunted house, similar to the Lonesome Ghost Mickey Mouse cartoon. Walt felt like the idea of a rundown house wouldn't be good for the park's image. So the Imagineers found the book in the Walt Disney Imagineering Information Research Center in Glendale, California. And when they saw the design, they immediately fell in love with the idea of having the elegant house on the outside, but all the spooky on the inside. And from there, the Imagineers worked their magic and brought the Shipley Leckdecker house to life in the form of the Haunted Mansion. It's kind of crazy if you think about it, to think that an actual house in Baltimore, Maryland was the inspiration behind one of Disney's most iconic attractions. Who knew? Did you know that the Imagineers had to make 2 of everything for the Haunted Mansion? The Imagineers literally had to make duplicates of everything, from the audio animatronics to the figures, the props, and set pieces. Wow, that's exhausting. This was because Disneyland's version of the attraction would open in 1969, and then 2 years later, Disney World would open in 1971. While both Magic Kingdom's and Disneyland's attraction both have similarities, there's a couple subtle differences that make them unique. If you think about it, the Imagineers practically made 2 separate attractions for 2 separate theme parks, but technically it was the same ride, but duplicated it. That's just amazing. Did you know that the Haunted Mansion actually features a special tribute to another Disney classic ride in the Pet Cemetery? Within the Pet Cemetery located in the Magic Kingdom, Mr. Toad's tombstone can be spotted near the back of the plot. The grave marker is a simple rusted over statue of Mr. Toad. There's also a popular saying that supposedly is on the tombstone, but it hasn't been confirmed. It goes a little something like this. Here lies Toad, it's sad but true, not nearly as marketable as Winnie the Pooh. Whether or not this saying is true, it definitely holds a lot of history. You see, the location of where Mr. Toad's Wild Ride used to be is now home to none other than the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. There happens to even be an Easter egg of Mr. Toad on the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. When you're going through the scene of Owl's house, look down on the ground on the right. There's actually a painting of Mr. Toad and Owl. He's actually handing him the deed, almost like handing the baton like, now it's your turn, good luck. It's kind of a cool Easter egg, I have to admit. Now, if you're a chess player, then you're in luck, because on the outside of the Haunted Mansion, there happens to be something that kind of resembles that of a chess piece. Just before you enter the Haunted Mansion, look up and you'll notice something very interesting on the roof. You can actually spot giant chess pieces. But here's the thing, one of the pieces is missing, and it happens to be the knight. So the question is, what's the deal with the knight being missing? Well, there happens to be some symbolism. It's speculated that the reason why the knight is missing is because it's always night in the mansion, as in nighttime. If you think about it, this actually makes sense, because even in the Haunted Mansion Muppets movie, they have to spend the night at the mansion. Have you ever spotted a wedding ring stuck in the cement outside the Haunted Mansion? Well, it actually belongs to none other than the bride Constance. You know, the murder bride that throws you out the window? Yeah. She's so lovely. According to the story, Constance had a bit of a dark side and ended up marrying and murdering multiple wealthy husbands. I wonder if they saw the bride before her wedding. Yeesh. The wedding ring on the pavement is said that she actually threw the ring out the window and it was stomped on by the horse. Hence is why it was actually in the pavement. This is actually a very interesting and spooky story to the Haunted Mansion. It just goes to show you that even the smallest details in the attraction contribute to the overall story. It's a very cool detail that's often overlooked. There's one big question to the attraction that many people keep on asking. Is the Haunted Mansion room actually stretching? And the answer is yes. It's actually not your imagination. But here's the thing. Unlike the stretching room at Disneyland, which is actually an elevator that descends you 2 stories down very slowly. That's so cool. However, the one in Magic Kingdom actually stretches upward. It's an amazing and immersive effect that really adds to the spooky ambiance of the Haunted Mansion. If you want to fully immerse yourself in the stretching room, resist the urge to leave too quickly. If you linger a little bit, you'll hear the gargoyles in the room hissing, "Get out." It's just another very creepy little detail that makes the Haunted Mansion such an interesting and immersive attraction. As you make your way through the graveyard scene, you might notice a rather frightening looking caretaker and his dog outside the gates. But here's the thing, you might also recognize his face from another attraction in the park. The face of the caretaker animatronic can be found in the Jungle Cruise. Specifically, his face can be seen just above the tip of the rhino horn in the attraction. It's a neat little Easter egg that ties 2 of these Disney classic attractions together. Now, if there's one thing that Disney parks all have in common is that there's a bunch of hidden Mickeys all over the resort. But did you know that there happens to be a hidden Mickey in the Haunted Mansion? As you make your way through the ballroom scene, you might notice that some of the plates on the table are arranged to resemble a classic Mickey head. But here's when things get a little murky. Was this hidden Mickey originally meant to be there to begin with? Well, the general belief among Disney fans is that the Mickey plates had been made official, but the details surrounding them is a mystery. Some say that the cast members were responsible for arranging the plates in this way, while others insist that it was an intentional design choice by the Imagineers. Regardless of the origins, the Mickey plates on the table is just a cool little Easter egg that not many people know of. And just like the hidden Mickey, there happens to be another hidden Disney character in the mansion. If you take a close look at one of the chairs in the Haunted Mansion, you might notice something interesting. Though the resemblance can be a bit tricky to spot at first, there's definitely a hidden Donald Duck on the chair. The shape of the chair's head resembles the same shape of Donald's sailor hat, while the other part of the chair looks exactly like the brim of Donald's hat. The smile and the nose resemble Donald's duckbill, and the lines around the eyes resemble the same shape of Donald's head. It's a really clever detail that adds a bit of fun to the already spooky scenes in the Haunted Mansion, and just goes to show you that you never know what kind of Disney character you could spot. And there just happens to be another Disney character Easter egg in the Haunted Mansion. If you look closely at one of the scenes with the coffins, during the ride you will actually see a hidden Tinkerbell in the pane of the broken glass window of the coffin. It's a really cool Easter egg that is often overlooked. Now, if you've ridden the Haunted Mansion before, you know that the ballroom scene has got to be one of the most impressive and memorable parts of the ride. You see the ghosts waltzing around in the fancy clothes. It's almost like you're right in the middle of the ballroom with them. This technique is achieved by an old trick called Pepper's Ghost. It's actually a simple illusion that involves illuminating objects and reflecting them onto a pane of glass. And the end result is a ghostly, translucent image that appears to be floating in midair. Believe it or not, you can actually recreate this at home. All you need is actually a dark room, a few props, and a pane of glass or a clear plastic sheet. Just set up your scene behind the glass, shine a light on it, and then boom, you have a replica like the ballroom scene in Haunted Mansion. Of course, the Haunted Mansion's ballroom scene is a little bit more complex than that, but the basic idea is exactly the same. Now, if you've ridden the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, you probably have heard of the Hatbox Ghost before. He's a figure that was originally part of the ride when it first opened in 1969, but unfortunately the Imagineers had to remove him from the attraction because his special effects were not working. The idea behind the Hatbox Ghost was that his head would disappear from his body and reappear in the hatbox he was holding. But because of the lighting inside the ride, the effect just didn't work as intended, and the Imagineers decided to remove him rather than have a less than perfect effect in the attraction. But over the years, the legend of the Hatbox Ghost actually grew, and fans began to speculate about when he might make a comeback. And in 2015, their wishes was granted. The Hatbox Ghost returned to the Haunted Mansion in a new and improved form, with a new special effect that finally worked as intended. Now, if you've ridden the Haunted Mansion before, you're obviously familiar with the 3 Hitchhiking Ghosts, but did you know that they actually had names? The first one is actually named Ezra. He's the tall one with the hat, and he's always got a mischievous grin on his face. Next, there's Gus, the one with the ball and a chain. He's always up for a good time, but even if it means causing a little bit of trouble along the way. And finally, there's Phineas, the one with the carpet bag. He's the brains of the operation, always coming up with new schemes to keep us entertained. And of course, there's still the 996 other happy haunts in the Haunted Mansion. Another fact that's a little bit spooky and a little bit sad, the practice of scattering ashes in the Haunted Mansion. I know what you're thinking, wait, people really do that? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. Guests have literally tried attempting to scatter the ashes of loved ones in the ride, often in the hopes of giving them a one last ride through their favorite attraction. Of course, this is a big no-no, and for good reason. Not only is this against Disney policy to scatter ashes in the parks, but it's also a safety hazard and can cause problems with the ride's operation. So inevitably, when someone is caught trying to scatter ashes in the Haunted Mansion, the ride has to be shut down for maintenance, in quotes, while the ashes are cleaned up. It's really a sad and unnecessary disruption to the park's operations, and it's just a reminder that there are some things that just don't belong in the Disney parks. Now, I know that the Haunted Mansion can be a meaningful and emotional ride for some guests that have suffered a loss, but there are plenty of ways to honor your loved ones, but this is definitely not the way to go about doing it. Many people know that Walt Disney obviously played a big hand in the Disney parks, but specifically the Haunted Mansion, so much so that he was originally going to be the ghost host for the attraction. In one of the early drafts for the Haunted Mansion, Walt even recorded the narration for the ride himself. Now, if you've ridden the Haunted Mansion recently, you might be thinking, wait, that's not Walt's voice. And you're definitely right on that. The voice that we all know as the ghost host is actually none other than Paul Frees. But even though Walt's narration didn't make it into the final version of the ride, his influence can still be felt in every corner of the attraction, from the intricate details in the queue to the haunting special effects. Did you know that the Disney World version of Haunted Mansion was actually designed after a house in Pennsylvania? The design came from the Harry Packer Mansion. The impressive facade could have been taken from a Gothic novel, so much so that the building's design caught the eye of Disney Imagineers, and it became the inspiration for the Walt Disney's Haunted Mansion that we all know. Thank you guys so much for watching, hope you enjoyed this video, and if there's any fun facts that you know about Haunted Mansion, I would love to know. Leave a comment down below, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so you can be notified every Thursday when we have a new video, and as always, have it!